I'm super excited about this panel, actually. This is a panel, for those of you in the crowd who want to sell security and disaster recovery and all the products associated with cloud. And we've got an excellent panel for you guys today. Oh, yeah, go ahead, please do. Yep. And, these guys are basically going to kind of give you some tips. We're not going to go too deep here. We're basically going to kind of talk about how you break the ice with that potential customer and how you engage that customer to be able to offer these products to them. Because, look, the reality is a lot of us are just selling the telecom spend, right? And you're selling a couple $1,000 spend and leaving potentially, 7 to 10 to 20 times that spend on the table. So, I'm gonna start this off with some introductions. Actually, what I'll do is I'll pass the mic. You guys can introduce who you are, what company you're with, and we'll pass it back and start the questions. Here you are.
Hey, good morning. I'm Alvaro Gonzalez from TierPoint.
Hi, everyone. Ed Kim with IBM. I'm part of the GTS group, which is Global Technology Services. And I'm a sales overlay and an advisor and consultant for all of GTS lines of services in the channel.
Steve Hasselbeck with Flexential, and I'm the manager of solution architects.
Chris Ickelson with 360 SOC, and I'm the founder and CEO.
And I'm Paul Croteau, Channel CTO with Rackspace.
And Paul, you can hold that mic, man. We'll bring it back this way to start it. So first question for you guys. A lot of people that we work with are very telecom centric. What is a question or two? How do they engage? How would you suggest that a partner engage with their end user customer? Meaning, how would you open that conversation without, a lot of people are scared they're going to sound uneducated in front of the customer. How would you open that conversation to the customer?
So that's a topic near and dear to my heart. I present a lot on this topic. Channel sellers out there, 9 out of 10 of you or more have been slinging networks for your career. You know that topic really, really well. And it's human nature to stick with what you know and ask questions about things, circuits, ports, bandwidth, core networks and firewalls, maybe some managed services like UCAS, CCAS, things of that sort. And so folks stay and talk about that subject matter only. So my suggestion is instead of focusing on things that are technology or product specific, think bigger picture and talk about business situations, business scenarios, because applications drive all sorts of infrastructure below that topic. So when you're focusing just on your network, hey, we got 5G coming, you need a 10G circuit, you're focusing in the telco closet. I suggest you ask folks about what are you guys doing in the cloud today? What are you guys doing for security? You have to deal with data sovereignty issues or compliances or many things like that. And the reason folks don't ask about those questions is because human nature, they don't know the answers to potential questions. And so they don't want to lose street cred with their accounts that they work so hard to create. And well, what do you mean by that? Well, I don't know, never mind. So I suggest you talk to folks about business topics, what problems you're dealing with, compliances, things of that sort. Ask them about staffing, how many folks do you have doing these certain functions, and I can expand on that later. And then let folks know, hey, great, that's not my subject matter expert area of expertise, but I've got great partners like folks up here on the panel that can help with these things. Maybe we can schedule a quick call and talk about this in greater detail. Again, we want you to introduce topics to folks and then bring in folks like us to help you further discussions, bring in our subject matter experts. Sorry for the long answer.
Good answer. I think to take that a little bit further, I think that exactly is the case, especially when you look at the telecom agent community. And if I was talking to traditional VARs and resellers, I'd be talking at a different level because they're selling different types of services and potentially might have some of those SME top resources in place today. But when I talk to the agent partners across the United States about selling cybersecurity, or selling any of your services, do what you do best today, and that's cast that wide net. You just right now today potentially have only done that with products like Wireline or UCAS. If you cast that net out in that same approach and you just ask customers, where are you going to spend money? And you just listen to them, the cybersecurity projects will come up, the data center projects will come up, the DR projects will come up because you'll become a listener. And there's a lot of industry noise about trusted advisor. The trusted advisor is the best listener in the room. And if they can listen and they can connect the dots and you can be that channel to it, you'll be very successful. And it doesn't matter if it's cybersecurity, cloud, UCAS, Wireline, whatever it is, just throw a big net out there, write it down, call TCG, ask them, hey, who sells product in this space? Who sells service in this? And start getting those experts on those calls and drive that conversation for you, because you guys hold the keys to the money. We hold the keys to the talent. So allow us to work with you and sell security and DR and all these services together.
Just to go back to that, I mean, it really is about a business discussion. That's what we lead with. We want to try and understand what's important to that customer, what's driving them, what are the things that are keeping them up at night, and then you craft a solution that goes and solves those issues.
I think I'm 100% in agreement with everybody that spoke prior. I'd only add, in today's marketplace, I see that IT challenges has to align with executive sponsorship and the business needs of an organization. So obviously the impetus to move to the cloud is several, but one of it is to, quote unquote, save money, right? From an infrastructure, from a staffing perspective, being able to have everything migrated and lift and shifted to a hyperscale environment. But I think specific pointing questions you can ask specifically are you 100% confident in your current cybersecurity risk framework? Would you be willing to put your entire mortgage on the line, knowing that you would not be breached in the event of a disaster or something like that, right? That's huge, because jobs are being lost for people that are being breached if they don't take certain precautions and mitigate those breaches. I would also ask, are you looking to migrate to the cloud? Is your current colo environment, since many people on the channel are, again, UCaaS, CCaaS, connectivity and data center, are you looking to get out of a CapEx mode and go to more of an OpEx and outsource all your things into a hyperscale environment? That is a specific pointing question that I encourage and train channel people to understand. Resources, someone mentioned resources, staffing, with everything so disparate, technology so complex, it opens the door to a lot more potential security risks, right? So having that potential to move up to the cloud, managing it appropriately is, in my opinion, more important than ever. So really aligning the business needs with the IT needs and providing that IT as a service overlay and security overlay on top of it is really the future, and we see that quite a bit in IBM.
So a lot of smart people have already spoken. One thing I would say, maybe just conversations actually with a lot of the people in the TCG ecosystem, that I would maybe differ a little bit with one point, and that is, it's actually not true, I would say, in my experience and probably a number of our experiences, that everyone is actually just looking to get into hyperscale cloud at all. I do think that I hear from a lot of people actually, at TCG partners, saying that actually one of the reasons they're afraid of asking the question about cloud is that they expect they're going to have the person say, well, everything's going to AWS, that is the cloud, and then where do you go from there? Actually, there are lots of different ways, there are lots of different places for workloads and to live and to be secured and all of this stuff. So actually going back to where Paul started and then everyone built up along the way, I would say I advise people to ask about 3 different things, and that is, what do they want? What are they trying to accomplish to add value to the company? That's not a technical question, right? It's a projects question. What are they worried about? What are the gaps that they perceive in their own staffing, expertise, resources, whatever it is? And then finally, what do they need? What is it that's going to make the difference between getting home and really hitting it out of the park for the rest of the business and what's not, right? If you go with 3 principles like that, it's easy, I think, to fill in a conversation and take it to an area that you guys know well, right? So, yep.
Another great question along those lines is, what keeps you awake at night?
Yeah, I put that in my fear category. So not to editorialize a lot, but something that I think that feedback that I get from a lot of partners, I love what Paul was saying about being the best listener in the room, and that is that people tell us a lot. On the one hand, they'll ask us for, give me the specific questions that I should be asking, the silver bullet questions. And the problem is that if the silver bullet questions don't sound like you, then you sound like you feel fake when you're asking them. And that's why, my goal is usually to tell people the concept, not the question, so that you can make the question sound like you, and you can have real comfort level, in even getting to the point of saying, you know what, the best thing I can tell you is my way to be valuable to you is to bring in some experts. So sometimes no is the smartest thing that you can say. And, trying to steer away from giving people really specific descriptive questions, it's the same thing. I do, awake at night for sure, but the principle is what, yeah.
All right.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, to add to that a little bit more, though, I mean, I would say that even in the conversations I have at executive levels with organizations, and I'm pretty much involved in at one step of almost every process we sell, I still am never asking those questions that, people are asking us for. We really are just dumbing it down.
Right.
Everyone in the room today does something involving cybersecurity that a business needs to do. You all do it. If you can correlate that back to the questions to the customer, you now can relate to them because they lock their car at night. They lock their front door. They use a password on their phone. They have biometrics to get into their Wells Fargo account. You do all this today. So relate back to them and just ask Mr. or Mrs. Customer, as you're casting that wide net, what projects do you have around cybersecurity? Write them down, bring them back, but don't get so worried about, I need that magical question or I need that, silver bullet or that differentiator. Differentiating yourself a lot of times might just be speed to resource. It doesn't even have to be a product or a bell or a whistle. And if you start looking at it from that standpoint, you can be pretty successful selling all the stuff. I mean, I get these questions all the time. Everyone asks me all the time, Chris, how do you do this? I just ask a question. Tell me your projects. All I care about is what you're going to buy anyways. I probably shouldn't have said that on recording. but I mean, if you're not buying from me, what am I doing? Giving you free resources? My services aren't free. I only have so much time. So I want to get to the money, right? And on your guys' side, you're all salespeople. You got to get to the money. You got to get to it faster, and you got to find the people that need to spend the money now, and they're all out there. It's just a matter of being like the guy that traditionally sold it and just asking wide net questions because nobody's really knows this stuff too full to where there's not another opinion against it.
All right, so some great ways to kind of break the ice and jump in the customers, and this panel has a lot of knowledge. So I'm absorbing as well. So some of the partners we talk to, they say, look, is there a product that I can kind of like dip my pinky toe into the pool and before I jump head first in? Is there a specific product that you guys recommend kind of getting into a customer with, to start the relationship with? And I'll pass that to you, Omar.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one that is a big one for us is disaster recovery is actually a pretty great point of entry. All kinds of people historically knew that it was very expensive. All kinds of people, though, over time, as they've had a DR strategy that probably wasn't so great to begin with, their ability to generate money from the workloads that they don't have great disaster recovery on has gone up over time. So that's something that it lets people solve a really pressing problem that's gotten a lot worse, that maybe they've noticed it getting worse and maybe they haven't, but it's not a heart transplant either. So that for us is one of the really great ones. It's not the only one, but I'm sure you guys have some great add-ons as well. So, nice.
Yeah, it's a really hard question. It's a lot, and I'll just answer it with two: in cloud and in security. So DRBC, Disaster Recovery Business Continuity, is certainly one of them. But I would say, from IBM's perspective, if I were to pick one from a cloud side of things, it's our multi-cloud management platform. So we have a vastness of clients who are using a multi-hybrid cloud ecosystem, right? It's only going to grow. Right now, about 94% of enterprises are going multi-cloud, and near that number from the SMB perspective is using at least one public cloud or hyperscale provider. So having visibility into all your spend, all your assets. In the channel, you guys are familiar with TEM, Telecom Expense Management. I liken our tool and layman term it down to a CEM, Cloud Expense Management tool, just to make it very simple. So everyone needs visibility into their spend. People have disparate, as I mentioned, workloads all across the world, all across different zones, all across different public cloud providers, even colo, even on-prem, you name it, right? So having visibility into all of those workloads is really, really crucial, especially for regulatory needs, reporting, being able to report those assets, compliance. Now, security specifically, I would say governance, risk, and compliance. So doing any type of cybersecurity risk assessment, because you can't force someone to spend unless they understand where the holes and gaps are. And I never like to force and try to tell people they need to spend money on something unless I can tell them factually where those gaps are. And if you show them where those gaps are, they can take it to their executive sponsors, and it's typically easier to get sign-off on that budget and that spend, which really is the ultimate goal for any IT leader, right? So being able to find visibility into any type of cybersecurity risk framework and vulnerability test, and being able to see visibility and granularity into where the holes and gaps are in an organization, that could also be cloud, because we have a huge ecosystem now of IAM, which is identity access management. And multi-hybrid cloud, you got to have that single sign-on, the ability to authenticate and lift and shift to multiple clouds and have that authentication, right? So that ecosystem, at least from my perspective, is very, very crucial. But cybersecurity risk assessments, I think, is a good place to start.
DRAS is really big for us, and I think for all of you out there, one of the great things about it is that when you sell it, it becomes extremely sticky, and then you really don't have to do all that much work to have that environment grow. Companies are going to add additional servers, and when they do that, there's another, there's an upsell for you. You had to do nothing for it, so just that organic growth there is a great type of annuity.
From everyone in this room's perspective, if it doesn't pay recurring revenue, I wouldn't focus on it. So manage detection and response, you guys. 360 SOC. You can get your feet wet, ask people how they're monitoring their critical security events today, how they're remediating against them, and how they're triaging and remediating. And that's what pays your recurring revenue income, which as a telecom agent and a former telecom agent, that's what I want. That's what you guys want. Sell that.
There you go. Okay, so we're here talking about cloud and security and how to dip our toe and make some revenue. So for me, a lot of great topics here. I got to kind of come up with a different answer. For me, it's clean your room. Where's your stuff? So I call it a data center defrag. And I learned recently that I can't use the term defrag because kids today don't know what defrag is because they grew up on SSD. So the gray hairs understand what a defrag is. As companies grow, either hypergrowth or merger acquisition, just over time, their assets get spread in lots of places. So a great conversation to start folks with is, do you know where all of your applications are running today? Do you know where all of your digital assets are? Where's your data? And you'll find that it's in lots of locations. And usually that's not very cost effective. So what, on my side, on the Rackspace side, what we can do is you introduce us, you say, hey, I've got a customer that's got stuff spread out all over the place. They don't know what they want to do with it, or they don't know what the next steps would be. We can come in and talk about it, maybe do a professional services engagement, which is a one-time engagement that you get paid on, and that leads to an MRR, an MRC engagement where we're going to say, you got all this stuff all over the place, physical, virtual, maybe they're already in the cloud. Everyone's in the cloud already. You've got to figure out how to monetize that more. Find out where all your assets are, and then figure out how to consolidate that. That's old stuff there, definitely can be virtualized, or that can be put in the cloud. This can be consolidated. This is redundant. So doing a real inventory check on what you've got running, where's your data, and then that kind of leads to a whole lot of conversations. Well, we've got this app here and this data here, and that leads to, oh, well, who owns that? And now you start meeting other business unit leaders and other decision makers that can make purchasing decisions. I'm a very strong proponent of the concept of win fast, lose faster. As a former sales guy, you don't want to waste time. Some Seymour just keeps on asking for more info. You want to find the folks that are really want to buy stuff. So the more folks you meet at the account, the more likelihood you're going to find someone that wants to buy. So talking about asset organization, data center sprawl, rogue IT, whatever you want to call it, but cleaning up your room is really a great way to find potential revenue opportunities.
All right, man. Great. Some really great content. So, if anyone has been watching the TV or the news, or been on Yahoo or any news outlet, you've probably seen ransomware popping up all over the place, right? City governments are getting hit by ransomware. City of Atlanta, city of Baltimore. There's a city nearby here in Florida that just, I think they paid the ransomware people half a $1,000,000 or something crazy like that. So with the ransomware thing kind of blossoming, and then I'll start with you, Paul, and we'll work it back up. What are some things to talk about in front of a customer? Because it's just a hot topic right now. It'll definitely get you in that door.
Ransomware is scary. I've got a personal opinion on it. If you've been hit by ransomware, you're screwed. Thanks for playing. Game over. But I would suggest you talk to Lenny over there by the wall. He's got a great security company that can help you out. Lenny, raise your hand real quick. Okay, Lenny knows his stuff. Little plug. You didn't expect that, huh? Okay. So, no, if you've been hit by ransomware, most likely the folks that put it there have been on your network for a very, very long time, like months or more. And so you could think, I'll just go to backups. No, they've already planned for that. So you're kind of in a tough situation. You have to rebuild a lot of stuff. So the goal really is to prevent it from happening in the first place by deploying something that's very, very secure that makes sure that you can track user behaviors. And yes, that's an admin account, but it's not doing admin-y things. We better attack on that. And working with partners that can proactively identify the bad guys before they do bad stuff. I think the number is it takes between 90 and 100 days to find out that you've got a bad guy on your network. But working with companies like us, we can do things, put tools in place to prevent that from happening. To answer your honest question, it's I think, and guys, if I'm wrong, please tell me. I think if you've been hit by the ransomware, you're kind of in a really tough position.
Oh, I would say your statistic actually is mean time to detect,
Yeah.
meaning that it's when you have found out, but there are all kinds of people who never found out.
Yes.
So the time is actually really a lot worse
Yeah.
if you took right.
And your backups have rolled off.
Yep.
At that point. So.
They're in there.
So from a ransomware perspective, I look at it when I talk to customers and I talk to them, number one, you got to be scanning for your vulnerabilities. So you need some type of hygiene program. Take that a little bit further, you need somebody to execute on that hygiene program who can be accountable and responsible for it. Because you start taking these steps in place and putting measures in place in order to try to create an avoidance against things like ransomware. And then you got to combine that with, that recurring revenue, that monitoring component of it, which you guys, want to be selling to your customers. And somebody needs to be monitoring that the hygiene practices are done, whether that's through the vulnerability management program that a lot of us, SOC as a service or managed detection response providers provide. Whether that's then taking a look at, packetized traffic to make sure that things like SMBv1 might not be running in the environment. Maybe they're using a higher level. Looking at all these different things, plain text passwords running across the network, all these vulnerabilities that somebody could exploit at some point, and putting, measures around them to be able to, create a hygiene path. It's amazing when we turn up a customer. In all the years, I've only had one customer we've turned up that literally had malware in their environment when we turned them up. You talk to the marketing folks, they'll tell you like every other customer does. Not necessarily true. But what we find 99% of the time is horrible hygiene. People just, there's one lady at one of our customers, Sandy Sawyer, I always scapegoat her. And Sandy Sawyer loves going to news sites. And those news sites are all HTTP sites. And she enters her password in there in her Gmail. And in plain text, you can see the password. So if somebody has an exploit on one of those vulnerabilities today, they potentially could see that. Then they could get into her Gmail, then maybe her bank account. And all of that coincides into this process of getting to those critical assets at some type of, valuable asset and exploiting it. And ransomware is where they're using to, destroy. And then at the same time, exfiltrating data and doing everything they can, because if they're in an environment for 200 days, there's a lot they're going to do. And, we've all played video games and everything. We're all suspicious, just like in Zelda back in the day. You'd go in every room, right? So why would a hacker not do the same? So you got to put these measures in place. You got to monitor against them, and you got to have a good hygiene program. And you got to have disaster recovery.
Yes, you do. One of the things that we focus on is really around the recovery and making sure that you can actually recover, and to test that recovery, because the time to test it is not when something happened. So we have professional services that will go in and do ransomware gap analysis to see whether or not you're in a good posture to be able to protect from this, but also, can you actually recover or not, and how long? How long? It could be, 2 weeks, I think, before sometimes you actually discover these things. So having a good recovery strategy really helps.
100% agree with everyone's comments. Disaster recovery would be one. Life is all about prevention and mitigation, so that's two. I think a specific area you talked about response, I would focus on incident response. Okay, because again, everyone's heard about it's not a matter of if, but when. If that's the case, someone's going to get breached eventually. I don't care if it's ransomware or any type of malware. So you got to have a plan to be able to stop the bleeding quickly, right? Because people lose money. You have to understand, in the channel, most of the partners have SMB clients, solid, great ones that make them a lot of money. The average SMB goes out of business after one breach in 6 months. So this is very critical stuff, right, when it comes to this marketplace today. So having a solid incident response, stopping the bleeding, what I mean by that is even a specific tabletop exercise, a role play within all the departments within a company to understand what the procedures are, mapped to a policy, a Bible. I like to use the layman's a Bible in security, so people understand what they need to do in an event of a disaster. I don't care if it's a force majeure disaster or a ransomware malware breach. People have to have a plan, and if they don't, in this marketplace of SMBs, people will suffer really bad consequences. So that if you pitch it that way to your clients, I can almost promise you they'll listen because these are pretty factual numbers, right, in the marketplace.
So I think technically, actually, going to the old guy theme, it would be more like Zork than Zelda, right? But at any rate, to maybe add on to though some of the excellent things that these guys have already observed, what I would say is one thing that actually ties a couple of them together, and that is defense in depth in general. How many you guys? Again, lots of network experience. How many of you are familiar with the story of what happened with Dyne when they suffered that, at the time, largest ever DDoS attack? Do you remember that a couple years ago? Yeah, so actually I think that share price of the company specifically, I think, lost 42% on that day. They had some savage number of actually aggregate downstream economic loss, both measurable and then shaky numbers around loss of goodwill, loss of reputation, all of this stuff. So one thing that actually can be, if we think about all the security stuff in general as detect, protect, and remediate, one area that actually can be really great point of entry for you guys actually is something even just looking at DDoS and WAF, because how's 9 times out of 10 malware getting in? 9 times out of 10 is a big number. Frequently. Is it getting in or is stuff getting out? And that is attacks against firewalls that people do irrational things or the firewalls fail, at which point stuff gets into your network, stuff gets out of your network, and you can't see it. So that, kind of at the perimeter, right, as part of an overall strategy that everyone mentioned, that's actually a pretty great element that I don't think anyone else had mentioned, right? So, yep.
All right. So in addition to ransomware, and I'll throw this one up just to you guys, what are a few things that are keeping CIOs and business leaders up at night as it pertains to their security? Alvaro, if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking among some of us before about there being so much noise in our industry in general about there being this dramatic shortage, unavailability of talented security people to be able to handle this. And I think that, on the one hand, Chris, you made a great point that there is not a shortage of talented people to do this. It's just that they're not working for your customers, right? They're hard to find, they're hard to retain, and then they get trained up on skills, they get very sharp, and they get recruited away by someone else giving them more money. That kind of thrash of people in-house with such a significant function is one of those things. Again, to not step on everyone else's talking points, I'll stop after one, but...
That one's close though.
You want to go?
Oh, go ahead.
Probably, in my opinion, if you were to ask people what keeps them up at night, is if they actually have complete confidence in their current, again, cybersecurity framework, right? So a lot of organizations don't have, and I understand why, because it costs money to build one, and really, 10 years ago,
Right.
it's like insurance. You don't buy it until after the fact sometimes, right? Which is unfortunate, but that's how we are, and organizations are no different. But having a specific, like I mentioned, security playbook or a Bible or a policy that really maps to specific security frameworks like NIST, you guys all heard of, or ISO standards, whatever standard it is in every single industry vertical, you got to be able to have some type of policy in place mapped to specific controls and have that plan readily available, whether you're a small, medium-sized, or large organization.
I think if we can go back to compliance, we have a lot of customers that don't fall under any type of compliance. They're not PCI, they're not HIPAA, and so a lot of times they'll just put in a firewall, not monitor it, sort of Ron Popeil, set it and forget it type of thing, and it just so so many breaches just go unnoticed that somebody's now in their network. And so what we talk to customers about is it doesn't matter if you fall under a HIPAA or a PCI, choose one of these standards and go and implement it. It's what you're supposed to be doing. It's what you're supposed to be doing with your customers' data. It doesn't matter if it's healthcare, if it's credit cards, anything like that, or just PII. You should be implementing these policies.
It's kind of an interesting one. I don't ask the questions about keeping you up at night and all that. I try to steer real clear of the salesy marketing conversation. In fact, every CIO that ever tells me this is what keeps me up at night, I've never sold either. So I'm still maybe a little bit thrown off on that one. But the thing that I'm finding is if you can figure out what drives those executives, it's not necessarily what keeps them up at night, because most of these people have no problem going to sleep, making a very nice check, secure or not secure. Doesn't matter. It hasn't hit home, and it might not ever hit home. So I try to position it more around there's got to be some type of a driver. The driver might be compliance. There's all these new state regulations coming down. GDPR was big last year, NYDFS the year before. But you start looking at it, so that's a driver. The other thing that I'm finding with these guys are marketing is huge. I've probably the 3 of our last 5 MDR customers we've onboarded, the peer play for bringing in the security was a marketing differentiator against their software company competitors. They want to be able to go to the big bank and say, here's my laundry list of what I've done. Prove that I haven't done it, while their competitor hasn't done any of it. It's huge marketing differentiator. The other thing that I'm finding when I ask these CIOs and CISOs, it's more around, Ed brought it up a good, around IAM and asset control. That's probably one of the biggest things I hear at the CIO level is I just don't necessarily know that we are tracking all assets. And are we monitoring against them, and have we applied some type of principle or baseline against those assets? So those are really the 3: marketing differentiator, a little bit of compliance, and just not knowing what's on the network. But I'm just not talking to CIOs and CISOs and CEOs and they're saying, this is what keeps me up at night. And when they say it, I run, because then why have they not already funded it today?
So fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Do you know your cost of downtime? No, I don't know the answer to that. What's your annual revenue? Divide that by 365, that's your revenue per day. How much would that be impacted if your infrastructure was down for an hour or half a day or a day, et cetera? How much does it cost to find quality security personnel? I know we got to rush, we're running out of time here. A typical cybersecurity person on the East Coast or West Coast costs about $250,000 a year or more. To staff any one single function in IT requires 7 FTEs, full-time equivalents, first, second, and third shift in the weekday, first, second, third shift at the weekends, and one more person to step in when someone's out sick or on vacation or in training, et cetera. So you need 7 bodies to staff any one single function. So cybersecurity, you need 7 of those. That's $1.75 million a year just for that function. Then you need operating system folks, some database folks, networking folks, other folks, VMware, cloud, whatever. So most of your customers out there don't have that level of staffing. And if they do have some of those folks there, what's their recruiting risk? Someone mentioned earlier about recruiting risk. When you develop those cybersecurity skills or those cloud skills, they're getting hit up on LinkedIn every day. We're all getting blown up, I'm sure, every day. You know this, you know that, you're getting recruited away. What's the impact to you, not only about the cost of downtime, but what's your recruiting loss? What happens if you lose your VMware person or your cyber person? And how are you going to go forward? We get calls every week. We lost our VMware girl. We need help. Can you help us out? Absolutely. So staffing, cost of downtime, these are big non-technical things you can talk about. And then again, I don't want you memorizing our portfolios. I don't want you becoming security experts or cloud experts. That's not your job. You're out trying to make money, and so you want to flex the relationships you have today on topics you're not talking about today. Step out of the telco room, ask some business questions about cost of downtime, compliance, security, things of that sort. And when they say, yeah, I want to talk about that, you say, great, I've got a great partner. I can go to TCG, leverage their SEs, because you can't sell without SE. Don't forget that. You can't sell without the SE. And so they're going to help you point to the vendor that makes the most sense for that particular sales solution. We're all here to help you out. I kind of rushed that because we're about done. Is that correct? We're good. All right.
So that's probably the most important takeaway. If you have a takeaway from this, get these guys involved because they know this better than anybody else, right? So open the door, walk your customer right to one of these companies and allow them to do the heavy lifting. You don't want to try to chop through this yourself. So we're going to open up for a couple questions before we go ahead.
So I do physical security and telecom as a secondary, rather than most of the people in here would probably do it the other way around. So I wanted your opinion on how to layer in cybersecurity and sell that along with the physical security of video surveillance, access control that I'm already selling.
It's all in the same.
Yeah, I mean,
It's one of the domains.
right. One is physical and one is not physical, but the principles are actually all the same.
Yeah, most
You want to
stuff
keep
the
them
same.
out. You want to know who came, who left, when they did it. So just to ask, hey, the physical security part, we've got this pretty sorted out. But what about all of the place where actually the money is getting generated by all the applications in your business? Can we have the conversation reaching into there, right? Because principles are important. The principles are the same, right?
And think about security monitoring. Think about security monitoring.
It
ADT's
is
been
the
making
camera,
trillions of dollars for years. It's not new. None of this stuff's new. That's the thing. I mean, and we have some new videos coming out too, HTG videos, kind of talking about this. Really dumbing these conversations down, because we're trying to do it too. The people on the other end of that conversation aren't educated either with it. So you can talk above them, and now you make them feel like they're not as important as you are. Or something,
That's why the principles
and you lose
matter,
it.
right? Yeah.
But you're in a unique position because you're already talking one of the domains, and now once you start talking about the physical side, you start talking about things like biometrics. Okay, well, who's going to monitor the activity that comes from the key cards, the biometrics? The access to that. Who's going to monitor the changes that allow somebody to enter the building? So now you're just walking yourself right into that conversation, which in this room is residual income.
It's a good question. Physical security is very expansive. So my advice from an approach standpoint is to look at, again, IAM, Identity Access Management, from a 2FA, two-factor, multi-factor authentication. So if you do any type of physical security, maybe if you don't provide this service, my suggestion is use people to help you increase your revenues in areas within physical security. That would be my advice. So pointed answers to that would be, 2FA, MFA. It could be in a data center. It can be a lock and key on-premise building. You name it. You could provide consultation, advisory services, and maybe implement those type of controls. I don't know, exactly your business, but this is just, again, off the top of my head. Another one would be there's physical pen tests. There's people that actually, so IBM has a service too that's a physical penetration test. We offer like 15 dozen penetration tests at IBM, and one of them is we can actually impersonate you or like an employee of one of your clients, put a hat on, I'll go in there and put a shirt on of your customer with their customer business name, see if I can penetrate the lobby, go into the office, see if I can take a picture of their accounts payable and receivable monitor and leave. That's a physical pen test, right? So that's another thing you can advise and provide services and revenue on.
Don't do that yourself right now, because there's 3 people sitting in jail in Iowa waiting for bond to try to get out, and they were hired by the state of Iowa to do the physical pen test, and they're sitting there on charges right now.
Sounds like a case for outsourcing.
Yeah.
They did outsource it. Don't do that yourself. Call IBM to do it. HTG.
You seem like a smart guy. Hire the right people. But you see my point, right? These are some of the things that I would suggest. Pointed things in your area that will help you make money, right? So.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
All right. Well, guys, thank you very much for being on the panel. Great information. Get a quick pick.
Thank you all for showing up. Thank you.